Tonight, we're live from the Vatican with the outpouring of grief and gratitude for Pope Francis. Church officials working overtime to make sure everyone gets a chance to say goodbye. Nearly 100,000 lining up to pay their respects. A constant stream of the faithful as we learn more details about the final journey for Pope Francis, including a funeral route past the Forum and the Colosseum. Back in the U.S., a gunman opens fire at a warehouse in Miami. SWAT teams rushing in, taking out the shooter, 2 others injured, and it all went down as employees participated in Take Your Child to Work Day. Wildfire suspect caught. The man police believe is behind a New Jersey wildfire captured. How authorities say he started one of the worst fires in the state's history. Shannon Sharpe stepping aside from ESPN, at least temporarily, as the former NFL pro and broadcaster is accused of rape, how he's vowing to fight the allegations. Dramatic testimony in the Karen Reed trial, the argumentative text between her and her boyfriend from the day before he was found dead. Read out loud in court. Did that fight over text turn deadly? Former NFL player swarmed by cops, guns drawn, he and his daughter ordered to the ground, all because of a mistaken identity. He speaks out to us why he's not accepting the police's apology. And the dog lost and found, how a car fire on a highway led to the discovery of this missing pet in a storm drain, now reunited with its owner. Plus, from here in Rome, the men who guard the Pope, what we know about one of the oldest military units in the world. A special edition of Top Story starts right now. And good evening. Top Story coming to you live tonight from the Vatican as nearly 100,000 pack St. Peter's Basilica over these last 2 days right behind me, getting that last chance to offer prayers and express their gratitude in person. Take a live look inside. You can see droves of people still passing through even at this very late hour. They have blown past that midnight deadline for a second night in a row, and you can see those crowds still filtering in and flowing right to the altar there. So nearly 90,000 people, according to the Vatican, have filed inside of one of these holiest churches in the world, some getting their places in line just before dawn. New video of the Pope's relatives sitting in front of his coffin saying their last goodbyes. And right now, we're learning more about Pope Francis's funeral service as cardinals finalize the details. In a moment, you'll hear from an American priest taking part in the ceremony. After a final day of public viewing at St. Peter's Basilica, Saturday's funeral service will be held in St. Peter's Square. Then the Pope's body will be taken outside of the Vatican and will be laid to rest at a basilica, the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, marking the first time in more than a century that a pope will not be buried in the crypt at the basilica. The Pope expressing in his final testament his wishes for a more simple burial, right in line with what he preached for over a decade as pontiff. The aisle inside St. Peter's Basilica has been packed like this for nearly 2 days now. More than 90,000 people have paid their respects to Pope Francis so far. Vatican cameras capturing this moment, showing a nun who was a close friend of Pope Francis, allowed special access near the casket. She then begins to cry.
He wanted peace, and he was a good man, and he was so kind. I mean, I got really upset when I heard he passed away.
Cardinals are meeting daily to finalize plans for Saturday's funeral in St. Peter's Square, with the Vatican revealing new details today, including the libretto, a program with the planned readings, prayers, and psalms. The Vatican says delegations from 130 countries will be there, including 50 heads of state. These American college students told me they will be too.
When I heard that the Pope died, I just instantly came to the conclusion I have to go to the funeral, you know. I very much so respected the Pope and I really liked him.
Father Patrick Briscoe met Pope Francis several times and will take part in the funeral. What do you expect from the funeral mass?
I expect there will be much cheering, much jubilation. We'll see these great crowds of young people coming enthusiastic about their faith, but wanting to pay their respects for the only Pope they've known in their lifetime.
After Mass, Pope Francis's body will be transported through the streets of Rome. The route, which police shared with NBC News, will pass near the Forum and Colosseum, ending up at Santa Maria Maggiore, the basilica where Pope Francis often prayed and where he's chosen to be buried. Today, the Vatican releasing the images of his simple tomb. Look closely. There's just one word:
Franciscus, and announcing on Saturday the steps of the basilica will be lined with a group of poor and needy. Also attending the funeral, Syrian refugee Wafa Eid, who told me she doesn't know if she'd be alive without Pope Francis. In 2016, the pontiff, along with the St. Egidio humanitarian group, helped rescue her family from a refugee camp, resettling them in Rome.
If you could have said one last thing to him, what would you say?
I would thank him, she says, because he changed the future of my family.
And tomorrow, the Pope's casket will be sealed. A pouch containing coins minted during his papacy will be placed in the coffin, along with a metal tube containing a legal document called a rogito, which records the Pope's life and works. We're going to have much more from here at the Vatican at the moment, including more on the military guard in charge of protecting the Pope. We are also following breaking news back at home out of Miami this time, where police say a gunman opened fire at a warehouse, leaving 3 wounded, including the shooter. Dramatic video capturing the moments the gunfire rang out. George Solis has the late details.
Dramatic moments of a shootout today in Miami, caught on video, after officials say a suspect opened fire.
Advising police were having a shootout. There were several people in the area, including small children.
Video also showing officers with weapons drawn and people running for cover amidst a hail of gunfire. The harrowing scene unfolding around the lunch hour at a warehouse in southwest Miami. Deputies with shields swarmed the building as several people were evacuated from nearby businesses. Some running out of buildings with their hands in the air. Lydia Morgado was in the car with her daughter and was heading to a cheerleading class near where the gunfire began. The pair ducking down for cover.
Seeing my daughter scream in terror, that was really hard. Because as a parent, you're like, at that moment, I felt like we need to be safe.
The sheriff saying 3 were wounded, including the shooter. Hospitals saying they are treating 3 patients now in critical condition.
We want the community to know that right now there is no imminent threat.
George Solis joins us tonight from Miami. And George, I understand this all went down on a Take Your Child to Work day?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. You can imagine for parents like Lydia Morgado, who you heard from there, just having to explain to her child what they were witnessing. They had to duck down in that car as those gunshots were ringing out. And Tom, I should note, we just became aware of a new press conference here within the next 10 minutes or so with the sheriff, who will hopefully provide us more updates on not only those injured, but more on the shooter himself. Authorities very clear that this is still very much an active investigation. The scene off to my left here, still inaccessible to most. They're hoping to get more information from the public as well, anyone that may have had video recordings to help them solve this case and find a motive for this shooting that rocked this Miami neighborhood. Tom?
George Solis, George, we thank you for that. Back overseas now, Russia launching one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine's capital in months. President Trump taking to social media today to issue a rare criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him out by his first name, pleading with him to stop the attacks. Chief international correspondent Keir Simmons has more.
Tonight, President Trump addressing President Putin by his first name, writing, "Vladimir, stop," after 12 were killed by a Russian onslaught on Ukraine's capital. A massive strike, and one missile may have been North Korean, Ukraine's President Zelensky says. How much more, this Ukrainian woman pleads.
I didn't like last night. I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired.
The images from Kyiv of families cowering in shelters, nothing like the peace deal the president still promises. Very bad timing, Trump wrote in his message to Putin, insisting today a deal is still close.
We're putting a lot of pressure on Russia. I think that they both want peace right now. They're ready to do something.
Though Trump wrongly calling Putin's failure to take more Ukrainian territory a concession.
Stopping the war, stopping taking the whole country, pretty big concession.
And just 24 hours earlier, his rift with President Zelensky magnified after the Ukrainian leader refused to accept the U.S. proposal to recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea, saying it's against Ukraine's constitution.
I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far, it's been harder.
Zelensky cutting short a foreign trip, saying it's Russia that has refused an unconditional ceasefire. The Kremlin insisting tonight Putin stands for a peace that respects Russia's interests. On the streets of Moscow this week, this Russian woman telling NBC News there needs to be a truce, but this man urging Russia to keep fighting. And in Kyiv, this woman saying, we do not need peace at any price. Battle-hardened views making compromise harder.
And with that, Keir Simmons joins us tonight. Keir, you have the Americans, and they seem to be at the end of their rope with both the Russians and the Ukrainians. And you have the Russians launching those deadly strikes on Kyiv. So do we have any idea where the peace deal stands tonight?
Well, Tom, there is a cacophony of voices surrounding these negotiations. People talk about the fog of war. You could call it the fog of talks, of peace talks. President Trump's envoy, who was at the peace talks in London this week, General Kellogg, told me today they were, quote, candid, constructive and productive. But the talks, Tom, are also exposing red lines on all sides that make achieving a deal really difficult. And President Trump saying today, we want it done fast. We have a deadline. Tom?
Our Keir Simmons tonight. Keir, we thank you. Back in the U.S., President Trump is approaching his 100th day in office, and a batch of new polling is telling us how the American people feel about his administration so far. A new survey from Pew Research putting the president's approval rating at 40%, 10 points underwater and down 7 just since February. Gallup now tracking his approval at the 100-day mark, well below his recent counterparts here, as well as every other president since World War II. The only administration that was lower was his, the first Trump term back in 2017. On the economy, the numbers are even more dire for the White House. Pew finding a 14-point drop in confidence in his economic decision-making since November, 59 to 45. Even on immigration, his numbers have slipped. Pew finding confidence has ticked down from 53 to 48. So will these numbers impact his policy in any way? Joining us now to discuss this is Meet the Press moderator and our good friend, Kristen Welker. Kristen, great to have you on the show tonight. Look, we throw all these numbers out. We know that the president keeps score. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he can't run for re-election, regardless of the hats that MAGA world is now making tonight. But he's got to be looking at these numbers wondering what's going on.
Tom, there's no doubt about that. And I think you really highlighted the biggest area of concern for the president, for his administration. It's those low marks that he's getting on the economy. As you rightfully said, why was he put into office initially? Remember, he promised to bring down prices on day one. And while we have seen some prices come down in some areas, prices have also gone up in other areas. And retailers are warning they could go up even higher in the wake of those sweeping tariffs that he imposed. Now, the president is arguing give his tariff policies time to work. And I think the question is, how much time are voters going to give him, Tom? Consumer confidence is at an all-time low. And even though the White House is saying, look, there are some trade deals that are just around the corner, comments really aimed at trying to calm the markets and some jitters from Wall Street to Main Street. The question is, how much time will Americans be patient? And I've been talking to Republican strategists, and they say he really has until the midterms, essentially, to make his case that his tariff policies are working. But that is going to go by very quickly. So we'll have to see how that all unfolds, Tom.
Yeah, his policies clearly will be on the ballot come those midterms. I also want to show you the results of our new Stay Tuned Now Gen Z poll, which digs into young adults' feelings about the economy. When surveyed, American adults 18 to 29 disapprove of Trump's handling, look at that, of the economy more than any other age group at a rate of 69%. And yet, when you ask them about their personal financial situation, only about 30% say they're worse off than a year ago. About a quarter say they're actually better off, and more than 40% say around the same. So those numbers can be a little confusing. How do you make sense of that?
Well, I think, Tom, it is significant that that better off number is not higher, because that was really the core of President Trump's promise to Americans, including and especially to young Americans, that he would make their lives better off. And you have a generation, Gen Z voters, who are starting their lives against the backdrop of a very troubled economy right now. The fact that you have all of this volatility on Wall Street. Now, look, President Trump, in an attempt to try to quell some of that volatility, saying he's optimistic he could, for example, get a trade deal with China, really trying to soften his language. He had threatened that he was going to try to get rid of the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, for not lowering interest rates. He softened that language as well, Tom, to try to really quell those concerns. But again, you have younger voters who are so key to the overall electorate right now, largely saying they are not satisfied with what they are seeing. And that could be significant, not just for the midterms, but beyond.
So, Kristen, we're 100 days in. There has not been a lot of turnover, right? The first Trump administration was known for a lot of personnel changes, chaos, especially in those early days. And we haven't seen that, right? Trump 2.0, there hasn't been as many people leaving, yet there are some officials that have made some serious mistakes, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, maybe even Elon Musk. What is your sense of what's happening with his cabinet and those close advisors?
It's a really great question. There has been a lot of scrutiny on the defense secretary, on the national security advisor. I've been talking to allies who say they are closing ranks around these top officials, in part for the very reason that you lay out, because President Trump does not want to see so much turnaround in his second administration. As one ally put it, there is a quote unquote no scalps policy. So that's why you're seeing not just the president out really defending his defense secretary, his national security advisor, really slamming media reports that seek to criticize them, but also outside allies doing the same thing, trying to close ranks around some of those top officials who are embattled, again, to try to create more of an administration that at least outwardly is showing signs of stability in that regard, Tom.
Kristen, welcome first. Kristen, always great to have you on the show. And we have breaking news tonight in the Bryan Kohberger murder case. A judge ruling that prosecutors can seek the death penalty against Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. Kohberger's lawyers had argued that executing someone with autism would constitute cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment. Kohberger has pleaded not guilty. The trial is set to begin in August. To another case now we're closely watching in Massachusetts. It was a dramatic day in the Karen Reed trial. The prosecution read out text messages in court which were sent just hours before her boyfriend died. The messages seemed to suggest the two had been fighting, and a contentious piece of video evidence was finally played for the jury. Emily Aketa is following it all for us.
Karen Reed's murder trial redo ramping up today, with the prosecution zeroing in on texts between Reed and her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, appearing to argue the day before his body was found in these frigid conditions.
Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now.
The text shared on the stand by a state trooper. This from Reed.
And you don't want to fight weekly, but fly off the handle at 8 a.m. with me, like you're setting me up to fail.
Prosecutors allege later that day, Reed struck O'Keefe with her car in a drunken rage and left him for dead in the cold back in 2022. Reed's defense team says she's not guilty, arguing there was no car collision and that O'Keefe's injuries are more consistent with being beaten and attacked by a dog. Prosecutors today playing a TV interview where she described what she had to drink.
And I was going, when I've had a few drinks and I drive, I always drive extra slow, so I know my alerts aren't as sharp as they should be. But I shouldn't have been driving.
It came a day after this emotional testimony from O'Keefe's mother.
I hear Karen Reed yell, "Peg, is he dead? Is he dead, Peg? Peg, is he dead?"
The prosecution also played a clip over the defense's objections, showing Reed imitate how O'Keefe's mother allegedly reacted after his death.
And his mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, "I think it looks like he got hit by a car. It looks like he got hit by a car."
Do you think we will see Karen Reed take the stand?
The thing I've been wondering about is how does the defense counter some of these video clips that are played, since Karen would have to either say this is what I meant or this is what I said or this is what the context was of it. So I wouldn't be surprised.
The defense today questioning a friend of O'Keefe's who had previously testified that the couple often bickered, but today offering there was more to their relationship.
And during the month before John's passing, that January of 2022, you observed their relationship in your presence to be normal, caring, and affectionate, right?
Yes.
Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
And still ahead tonight, the former NFL player and his daughter held at gunpoint by police and by mistake. How police ended up going after the wrong guy. Plus, a Tesla Cybertruck crash involving one of the country's best high school basketball players, his mother asking for prayers, what we're learning about his condition. And you may have seen them in our coverage here at the Vatican, the Swiss Guard sworn to protect the Pope. What it takes to be a member of this elite military unit, that's coming up in the show. We are back now with body cam footage showing the moment a former player for the Arizona Cardinals was held at gunpoint by police and put in handcuffs while picking up his daughter at the airport. But police later admitting they arrested him by mistake. Our Ellison Barber spoke to retired NFL linebacker about the harrowing ordeal.
Get on the ground, both of you! On the ground! Lay on the ground!
Heart-stopping moments caught on police body camera. Showing Mesa, Arizona police holding former NFL player Wesley Lisi at gunpoint by mistake.
I've never been so afraid in my entire life.
The 53-year-old retired Cardinals linebacker was picking up his daughter from Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport when police pulled up.
Why are you guys arresting us? I'm asking whoever's near me, can you explain what's going on? Why am I being detained? Why am I being arrested?
According to Mesa police, officers were responding to a shooting at a nearby apartment complex on April 10th and received multiple 911 calls that included descriptions of the suspect's car, a white four-door Mercedes with temporary tags.
Do you have temporary plates, and does that description match your car?
I have a brand new Mercedes. It's got temporary plates on it. But here in the state of Arizona and in Scottsdale where I live, there are tons of white Mercedes that are around here.
Mesa police say an air unit spotted a car matching that description entering the airport.
Get on the ground, both of you!
With guns drawn.
Lay on the ground!
Officers ordered Lisi and his 26-year-old daughter to the ground, cuffing and detaining both of them.
My understanding is that the individual that they were after was a white male. I've never been mistaken. I'm 6'4", 240 pounds. And I'm a nice-looking man, but I'm dark-skinned, and there's never been a confusion of a Caucasian in myself.
Mesa police tell us there was a description provided of the shooter, that he was possibly a white male wearing a black mask and black sweats. But they say they do not believe officers with the vehicle that Lisi was in were aware of that information. According to Lisi, after about 20 minutes, officers realized they had the wrong man. They released Lisi and his daughter.
That's not how you want to get picked up from the airport.
Police say they did make a mistake. In a statement to NBC News, Mesa Police Department said in part, quote, after speaking with the occupants, it was determined they did not match the description of the shooter, and they were released. For Lisi and his attorney, it's too little, too late, and they intend to sue Mesa Police.
Throwing him on the ground, throwing his daughter on the ground, that's an assault. Having guns, multiple guns pointing at him is an assault.
Do you think that fear will stay with you for the rest of your life?
Oh, it has to. That fear will be with me until my time comes.
What a terrible incident for him and his daughter to have to go through. Ellison Barber joins us tonight from New York. So, Ellison, did police ever actually locate the right suspect?
They did, Tom. It was about 5 days later. Ultimately, they arrested a 19-year-old man named Hayden Beaver. They are saying that this was a robbery that turned violent. That individual is now charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, armed robbery, as well as drug possession with the intent to sell. According to police reports, they say the victim who was shot in the leg here, they say he verbally identified Hayden Beaver as his attacker. Tom?
Yeah, I think mistaken identity is an understatement in this story. Okay, Ellison Barber joining us from our top story studios in New York. We thank you for that. When we return, former NFL star Shannon Sharpe stepping back from ESPN. What he's saying about the decision as he battles rape allegations. And we'll take you to El Salvador tonight for a look at the country's notorious mega prisons. What one man wrongly detained and now released says he saw on the inside. And welcome back to Top Story. We are reporting from the Vatican, where nearly 100,000 people have flocked to St. Peter's Square to pay their respects to Pope Francis. Many waiting in line for hours, all to spend just a few seconds before the Pope's body. A chance to say a prayer and give thanks. We've spoken to many here about why they were so drawn to this Pope, and many point to the changes he made to the church, especially in how he elevated women. Now that legacy will fall to the next Pope. Will he push forward the advances for women inside the church, or will there be a reversal? Our Molly Hunter is covering that all for us tonight. And Molly, you've been speaking to prominent women within the church.
That's right. And women certainly hope that this was just the beginning. What we saw in the last decade or so is just the start of something. In fact, Francis's former spokesperson, the first woman to do the job, said there's no going back now.
One of the lasting legacies Pope Francis leaves is a handful of very talented women he elevated to senior positions, always held by men. Back in 2016, a headline-grabbing appointment. With the first Latin American Pope came the first Spanish-speaking spokesperson.
Extremely difficult, extremely beautiful, and the honor of my life.
Paloma Garcia Ovejer was the first woman to serve as the deputy director of the Holy See press office. She credits Francis with pulling the church in line with society outside of Vatican City.
It's just the beginning. He did baby steps regarding women, top-level positions, but there's no way back.
But she was the first of many.
He made the head of the Vatican Museums, the director of the Vatican Museums, which is the second largest museum in the world, right after the Louvre. He gave this appointment to Barbara Yatta, and he gave it to a very skilled woman who's been able to face the challenges of a museum that receives 6.7 million visitors a year.
Several years later, Pope Francis gave the first woman voting rights in the Synod, the church's governing body, and later appointed the first woman to lead a major Vatican department. And from his hospital bed last month, his most high-profile appointment yet.
One of the last things that Pope Francis did was he confirmed the appointment of Sister Raffaella Petrini, who is essentially running the governatorato. Basically, she's the governor of Vatican City. And the way they talk about the arrival of Sister Raffaella, they talk about, and then the sister came, and everything started to get better. What Pope Francis has done is simply taken these women, these religious sisters or lay women, who have worked behind the scenes, carrying this incredible burden on their shoulders.
And given them the title.
Put them in the front lines. Put them in the limelight. Finally gave them the spotlight that they deserve.
Lavinia Roque Carrera is the Secretary General of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations and says Francis will be remembered for what she calls the appreciation of women.
An appreciation of women, which has translated into serious roles of power.
Yes, not only, but also listening to the most marginalized women.
Which was core to his mission. She also points out that it was no secret the new appointments brought some order.
He once mentioned that everything was working much better since they were there.
Not surprised.
Much more accurate, much more organized.
And this week, inside St. Peter's Basilica, as thousands filed past to say their final goodbyes, 81-year-old French-Argentine nun, Sister Genevieve Genengro, approached Francis's open coffin, a restricted area reserved for cardinals, bishops, and Catholic priests, in other words, for men. When she burst into tears, no one interrupted her. She was allowed her moment of personal grief, a break in protocol, though one that Francis may have approved of.
And Molly, what a moment every time we see it. Talk to us about the relationship he had with that nun.
So they were reportedly close friends for decades, first meeting back in Buenos Aires, and that friendship was so well known that some are saying that's why she was allowed to stay.
Yeah, such a special moment. Molly, we thank you for bringing us that story. In Top Stories newsfeed tonight, high school basketball star Elijah Arenas is in an induced coma after a car crash early this morning, that according to ESPN. The Los Angeles Fire Department says they responded to a call of a Tesla Cybertruck crashed into a tree and fire hydrant. A law enforcement source telling NBC News the 18-year-old was taken to the hospital in serious condition. His mother posting on Instagram and asking for prayers. Arenas is a son of former NBA star Gilbert Arenas. He's the 13th ranked recruit in the 2025 class and has just committed to USC. And the gunman who killed 7 people at a 2022 4th of July parade near Chicago sentenced today to life in prison without parole. Over a dozen witnesses testifying at the 2-day hearing. The gunman did not attend the proceedings and declined to make a statement, that according to his lawyer. The shooter pled guilty last month and had previously told police he was trying to avoid children while targeting adults. Southwest Airlines announcing it's cutting back its schedule. The airline plans to reduce its capacity in the second half of the year, citing weaker domestic bookings. This follows announcements from both Delta and United that they are also cutting back domestic flights this summer. Industry experts say this could mean higher fares and fewer options for passengers. And a car fire ending in an unlikely reunion. Crews responding to that fire in southern Massachusetts say gasoline was spilling onto the road from a broken tank. Once the fire was out, firefighters went to make sure there was no gas in the storm drain. But when they opened it up, they found something else. A dog hunkered down inside. Turns out he had been missing for more than a month. With the help of a local animal shelter, firefighters were able to reunite the pup with his family. Incredible he survived. And in New Jersey, an arrest made in connection with a massive wildfire that continues to burn. Joseph Kling, a 19-year-old from Ocean Township on the Jersey Shore, accused of starting the Jones Road wildfire. The massive fire has prompted evacuations and burned around 15,000 acres, including destroying a commercial building. Kling arrested and charged with aggravated arson and arson. NBC New York's Charles Watson joins me now from Waretown, New Jersey, just south of where the fire is burning. So, Charles, what do we know about these charges and how this fire started?
Well, Tom, as you mentioned, the suspect, Joseph William Kling, the 19-year-old, charged with arson and aggravated arson. We know that the aggravated arson count carries up to 10 years in prison. The arson count carries up to 5 years in prison. He appeared in Ocean County Court today. He didn't really have much to say at his initial appearance. We also heard from the Ocean County prosecutor, who wouldn't really go into too much detail about the case other than saying that his office is confident that Kling started that fire intentionally. He was asked if Kling was working alone when that fire was started. He said that this is an active investigation right now, but it's something that they are looking into. It's a possibility that that they certainly are looking at this hour. But Joseph Kling, again, not saying much in court today, and the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office looking deeper into this case to see if any other individuals were involved.
Yeah, and just behind your left shoulder there, we can see some firefighters. What is the latest on the firefighting effort?
Yeah, so we got an update from officials not long ago. They say the firefighting efforts continue to progress in the right direction. You mentioned it. The fire is at about 50% containment at this point. More than 15,000 acres burned. And they tell us crews continue to work around the clock. They'll be working throughout the night. They've been working all day long. And they are using every asset at their disposal, including 2 Black Hawk helicopters, we're told, that were provided by the National Guard to help these crews with their aerial support. So they are attacking the fire from the ground and from the air to try to do everything they can to get control of it. But officials have really made it clear over the last couple of days their efforts are not going to be everything that's needed to put this fire out. They're really looking towards the weekend when rain is expected to fall.
All right. Charles, we thank you for joining the show tonight. And tonight, NFL legend and broadcaster Shannon Sharpe announcing he is stepping away from his duties at ESPN, at least temporarily, as he works to fight sexual assault allegations against him. Sharpe saying in a statement today, at this juncture, I'm electing to step aside temporarily from my ESPN duties. I will be devoting this time to family and responding and dealing with these false and disruptive allegations set against me. I plan to return to ESPN at the start of the NFL preseason. We're joined tonight by NBC News legal analyst Danny Sabalos to break this down. So, Danny, what exactly are the allegations against him?
Rape, assault, and something called intentional infliction of emotional distress, which has to be based on extreme and outrageous behavior. And there's no question, at least the allegations in the complaint allege extreme and outrageous behavior. But of course, Sharpe has denied all the allegations against him.
And Danny, our Jesse Kirsch has reported earlier this week that Sharpe would be filing a countersuit against his accuser and her lawyer. He's come out publicly saying that this is a pure money play, that he's trying to be shaken down. What comes next in this case?
Yes, I mentioned rape and assault, and those are crimes, but this is a civil case, and this is a plaintiff, not the government, alleging rape and assault against Shannon Sharpe. So he can file a countersuit, and I expect that countersuit might be based on some kind of abusive process, essentially alleging that the plaintiff is abusing the legal system to try to extract money from Sharpe. That's what I expect Sharpe will say. It's consistent with his public statements, at least so far.
Danny Savalos will stay on top of this case. We appreciate having you on the show tonight. Now to an urgent crisis unfolding along the Southern California coast, where dolphins and other marine animals are dying. Some researchers say at levels we haven't seen. Liz Kreutz has more.
Tonight, across the Southern California coast, thousands of marine animals washing up sick or even dead over the past several weeks, including whales, sea lions, and most notably, an unprecedented number of dolphins.
We've never seen this many dolphins strand ever that I'm aware of in Southern California, and it's heartbreaking.
This week, 16 dolphins found dead at just one beach in San Diego, more than 50 found along the LA County coast, and tonight, this humpback whale washing up in the city of Ventura.
How would you compare this year to what we've seen in the past years?
Worse, bad, horrible, scary, concerning, all those words and more.
Scientists say the cause believed to be poisoning from toxic algae blooms that produce a neurotoxin called domoic acid that gets into the animal's food chain.
We had 9 yesterday alone.
The Marine Mammal Care Center Los Angeles says so far this year they've taken in 375 animals. Their typical budget for the entire year, 300.
We're having to pick and choose which animals we respond to, which animals can come in for care.
Scientists say they're now looking into whether debris runoff into the ocean after the LA fires is playing a role in the outbreak.
It has to have a contributing factor. Fire retardant is really fertilizer. That is food for algae. So it's sort of a logical assumption that that's going to feed the algae bloom.
And you can see there's a sea lion that's washed up here on the beach in Santa Monica. Experts say if you see an animal like this, do not approach it and call animal control. Back to you.
Liz Kreutz, we thank you. A stabbing at a private school in Western France begins tonight's top story Global Watch. Police say a 15-year-old boy stabbed 4 of his classmates earlier today. A young girl was killed. 3 others were injured. Teachers restrained the boy until police arrived and arrested him. Students say the suspect had sent out an email of grievances before the attack, but police say the motive is unclear. And tensions continuing to rise between India and Pakistan after Tuesday's deadly shooting that killed 26 tourists. You'll remember we reported that right here on Top Story. Protests erupting today in Kashmir where the shooting happened. Pakistan closing its airspace to Indian airlines and suspending trade and certain visas to Indian nationals. This follows India suspending Pakistani visas and a water-sharing treaty after its prime minister suggested there were cross-border elements to that attack. And the wife and child of Ecuadorian soccer player Jackson Rodriguez kidnapped in a home invasion. Rodriguez telling police he hid under the bed when he heard the front door being busted open. He says his family was taken after he heard them ask his wife if Rodriguez was home. The kidnapping coming 10 days after Ecuador declared a state of emergency over a rise in deaths and abductions. Officials blame the violence on organized crime groups. Now to the Americas, and tonight we have an up-close look at the notorious prisons of El Salvador. Recent deportations from the U.S. have drawn attention to the country's mega prisons where thousands have been detained and, according to human rights groups, are unable to contact their families or their lawyers. NBC's David Noriega traveled to El Salvador and spoke to one man who managed to get out after an agonizing year on the inside.
No contact with the outside world. Crowded cells with bright lights on 24/7. These are the conditions at Secot, the infamous mega-prison where Kilmar Abrego Garcia was first detained. He has since been moved to a different facility.
We know nothing.
And his family's lawyers, who have not been able to contact him, say he has effectively disappeared into the Salvadoran prison system.
Human rights advocates here in El Salvador say that Secot, the famous mega prison, even for its notoriously harsh conditions, is actually one of the better prisons in the country. And that other prisons, like this one behind me, are the site of systematic torture, systematic starvation, sexual assault, and other forms of mistreatment.
At this penitentiary in San Salvador, as in all others across the country, loved ones and lawyers have no way of contacting those inside.
The people detained in the prison don't get a lot of basics like toilet paper, even the clothes that they wear. Their families have to come to this shop and buy it for them. They're not given enough food to sustain themselves, so family members will often buy things like this protein shake so that they have enough nutrition to stay alive.
This couple is here for their son, imprisoned, they say, on a false accusation. It's a common story here. The streets of El Salvador were once ruled by violent gangs. In 2022, President Nayib Bukele suspended constitutional protections and in the ensuing 3 years, put more than 80,000 people in prison without due process. The streets are much safer.
Hoy te puedes dormir en tu casa pues tranquila.
This restaurant owner says she can now run her business without fear of being threatened and extorted. But Salvadorans have a new fear. Stories abound of innocent people swept up and lost with no recourse in a brutal system. Human rights groups have documented 370 deaths in prison since the crackdown, which they say is almost certainly an undercount. The government denied our request for access to various prisons, as well as our request for interviews. Bukele has acknowledged imprisoning some innocent people.
Y estamos liberándolos. Ya hemos liberado 8,000 personas.
But he says thousands have been freed so far, and eventually all will be released. Rights groups say many remain. And those who did get out have horror stories to tell.
Para dormir en el piso, dormíamos como pan de caja.
Victor Barahona, a local journalist, was arrested without explanation and spent close to a year in prison.
Un campo de concentración.
He tells me he spent months crammed in a small cell with 100 men.
No mirábamos el sol.
With no access to daylight and minimal food and water, he contracted skin infections and became delirious.
A mis hijos que los amaba mucho.
One day, convinced he'd die, he asked a younger man to tell his children he loved them.
Discúlpame que recordar.
It's painful, he says, to remember.
Este era yo, mira.
When he was finally released, he had aged dramatically and lost 80 pounds.
Are you afraid of what might happen?
He's one of few people willing to risk reprisals to tell his story.
No tengo nada que perder.
But it's a story, he says, that the world needs to hear.
Tom, the legal battles surrounding these cases are continuing in the United States. And while those cases are momentous for U.S. politics, they haven't done anything to change the reality these men who are detained here in El Salvador are facing on the ground, which is that they remain completely cut off from any contact with their lawyers or their loved ones. And as you just saw, Tom, that is the case for anybody who has a loved one in prison in El Salvador. Tom?
David Noriega reporting from El Salvador for us. David, we thank you. When we return, we're going to turn to some lighter news back in the States. It's draft day for the NFL, the biggest night of the offseason that has now turned into a spectacle of its own. Who will come out on top? Plus, from here at the Vatican, it's one of the oldest military units in the world. One of its biggest missions, to keep the Pope safe. What we know about the Swiss Guard. Welcome back to Top Story. One of the biggest stories right now in the U.S., of course, the 2025 NFL Draft kicking off in Green Bay, Wisconsin tonight. Fans from across the country descending on the city, eager to see who will be added to their team's roster. College football's brightest stars arriving on the green carpet ahead of one of sports' biggest nights, all hoping to hear their names called by Commissioner Roger Goodell in the first round. Baker Machado, our good friend, joins me now. He's the host of Front Office Sports Today, premiering April 29th on YouTube. Baker, congrats on the new show. So great to have you on the broadcast tonight. Let's start with the Tennessee Titans, who own the first pick of the night. We know all great things come out of Miami. Is Cam Ward heading to Tennessee?
It looks like it's a surefire thing, Tom. Yeah, good to see you as well. Yeah, the Tennessee Titans on the clock, and within just a few moments, the likely #1 pick gonna be Cam Ward, the quarterback from the University of Miami, who threw for almost 40 touchdowns this last year. He is seen by a lot of people as at least one of the top 5 best prospects in the draft and the best quarterback in the draft. Tennessee, by the way, has had some problems with Will Levis, their last quarterback over the last couple of years. So clearly here, Tom, Tennessee trying to build a future with the #1 pick here.
Yeah, he is clearly a special player. We hope he goes high up in that draft. Last year's draft saw quarterbacks taken with the first 3 picks, and there were a record-tying 6 chosen within the first 12 selections. But we don't expect that rate to be matched this year?
No, we don't. Really, Shedeur Sanders is the second best quarterback in the draft. And, Tom, nobody really knows where he's going to get drafted. There's maybe talk maybe Cleveland at #2, the New York Giants who have the 3rd pick, or he could fall all the way to the 2nd round. And this is a really big deal, Tom, because if you're picked at least 2nd or 3rd in the draft, you're likely your contract will be close to $40 million. If Shedeur Sanders somehow falls all the way to the 2nd round, well, it's going to cost less than $10 million for a team to put him on the roster. There are some other quarterbacks in there. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, likely a team like the New York Giants have been rumored to trade into at least the 1st round or the 2nd round to get him. But a clear drop-off from the #1 pick in Cam Ward to the other quarterbacks that are left here.
You mentioned Sanders. Let's talk about that other special player from Colorado, Travis Hunter, the Heisman winner, and one of the most intriguing prospects to enter the league in years, playing both wide receiver and cornerback. You think he can almost do it all? Where do you think he's headed?
I mean, it looks maybe at number 2, the Cleveland Browns likely going to pick him. And what's interesting, Tom, you mentioned that he's a dual threat. He wants Roger Goodell tonight, when he announces him as the pick, to say that he plays defensive back and wide receiver. That is so unprecedented for the commissioner to actually do. Also interesting here, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski, sort of downplayed the idea that Travis Hunter could play both defense and offense, saying that that's just way too much time that you'd have to spend with coaches on both sides of the ball. Travis Hunter seems to think that he'll be able to do it. He is a very amazing talent. He won the Heisman Trophy. He likely is going to go at least the number 2 to the Browns. But if you're a New York Giants fan, you are holding your breath, hoping somehow he falls to you at number 3.
Yeah, Iron Man football. There's only a handful of players in my lifetime that have been able to do that in the NFL. Analysts have said there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of this draft, that it's primed for chaos. What surprises do you think we could see, and what's going to happen with the Detroit Lions?
That's the most important thing. I have heard some reports that the Lions are thinking about trading up. They're in the 20s right now in terms of their picks, likely wanting to go up. Tom, there's so many good wide receivers and tight ends and running backs in this draft, so you might see a lot of trades there. But really, to sort of dictate how the night goes, see what the Jacksonville Jaguars do at pick number 5. A lot of people have them maybe taking a defensive lineman, or maybe taking Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State. If he does, a lot of scouts have told me, Tom, that is going to scramble the entire board for a lot of teams out there, and nobody knows who might be up for when they're about to pick.
Baker Machado, his new show is called Front Office Sports today. Again, it premieres April 29th. Baker, always a pleasure to have you on. We're back in a moment with more reporting from the Vatican with the men who guard the Pope, what it takes to join one of the oldest and most elite military units in the world. That's next. Finally tonight, here at the Vatican, we want to bring you the secrets of a group you might have noticed during our coverage this week, the Swiss Guard. Their colorful uniforms look straight out of the Middle Ages, and that's because the unit is more than 500 years old. The select few who can get in, sworn to protect the Pope, as their predecessors have done for centuries.
In life and even in death, the Swiss Guard is never far from the Pope's side, standing at attention in their distinct blue, red, and yellow uniforms and feather-plumed hats. They were there during Pope Francis's final public appearance on Easter. Later, lowering the Vatican's flags to half-mast after his death. Now they're standing guard at the altar as the Pope lies in state, all part of a mission that goes back half a millennia.
Swiss Guards have been around since the 1500s, so over 500 years. So really one of the oldest military units on Earth.
The regiment's uniforms and ceremonial halberd pikes, a remnant of their medieval roots as a group of Swiss mercenaries sworn to protect the Pope. An oath new guards take on May 6th of every year. Recruits for the coveted post must be Swiss men between 19 and 30 years old. They are practicing Catholics and unmarried.
It is a real sort of elite privilege and a select group of men who become Swiss Guards.
But don't let these historic uniforms fool you. These guards are soldiers.
They do serious training, both physical training, they do intelligence training.
Swiss Guards were there during a 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. Since that moment, the Swiss Guard has enhanced tactical training for its members. And since then, pontiffs have enjoyed a close connection to many of their guards. That's Pope Francis warmly recalling phone calls with some of his former guards earlier this year who came to visit him at the Vatican.
The Swiss Guards enjoy a reputation of being, one, incredibly efficient and loyal. They consider it a real privilege and an honor to guard the Pope and protect the Pope. And so they see this period in their life almost as one of service.
Now, as the College of Cardinals prepares to pick a new leader, the Swiss Guards are standing by, ready to serve for the next 500 years.
We thank you so much for watching this special edition of Top Story from the Vatican. I'm Tom Llamas. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.